We've talked about ChatGPT. We've talked about how it's a language model which can predict a probability distribution over next words. And we've also talked a little bit about the neural network ingredients that go into it. But in fact, one of the reasons it's so popular and people like using it so much is because it's more than just a language model. When I ask it something like, what was the shot heard round the world? It will give a very well-structured answer to it. It'll start with an introduction. The phrase, the shot heard round the world, refers to the opening shot of the American Revolutionary War, blah, blah, blah. It'll then kind of give the main details or the main answer here in this middle paragraph. And then it'll end with a concluding paragraph about this poem from Ralph Waldo Emerson, kind of retrospective about this shot heard round the world. This is very well structured. And if you play around with a basic language model, like the earlier GPT-3 model, like I talked about, you won't get things that are nearly this consistently useful. It'll usually have useful information, but the formatting will be weird and it'll be very inconsistent. An even more striking example is this one. Here's an example of a fake news story about Kamala Harris, : I want the system to generate a fake news story. And a language model would happily just generate something here. But ChatGPT says, as an AI language model, I must adhere to strict ethical guidelines, and one of them is not create or spread fake news. How did it do that? I said it was trained on data from the web, but nowhere on the web are people going around writing as an AI language model, blah, 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 especially not prior to 2022. So this highlights the last key ingredient of ChatGPT, which is the fact that it was learned from human feedback. So the folks who trained ChatGPT would give it a prompt, like the third president of the United States was blank, and generate two responses from the model. Maybe one response is Thomas Jefferson, and the other response is the third president of the United States was a founding father. Then they would get feedback from people judging which one of these is better. And so the person would say, okay, the first one is better. And then the model's parameters would be updated to reflect that. We could also do this for any prompt, really. So if we say, once upon a time, there was blank, one completion might be, there was a guy who went to CVS and bought Gatorade. Maybe not a very interesting story. Or there was a knight who set out to fulfill a prophecy of blank. And now a person says the second one is better. And that, again, updates the model to generate this more interesting story. So the folks at OpenAI who trained ChatGPT showed it a whole bunch of different examples and had people rate completions from across a bunch of different prompts. And so as a result, when you ask it for something like a story, you get a somewhat more interesting story. When you ask it a question, you get something that looks like a kind of more informative answer than you might have gotten otherwise. Or if you ask it for something to do something bad, it'll give you a non-answer. And this process was really one of the things that made this take off. The earlier system, GPT-3, existed in 2020, but no one was really talking about it or as excited until 2022, when this process led to the product that we know as ChatGPT. So this is called reinforcement learning from human feedback. It's a kind of a mouthful, but the key part here is that we use feedback from people to understand which kinds of answers are better or worse to different types of questions. That's the end of this segment.